The message arrived at 3 in the morning, Earth time. Ji-won Park sat up in her bed, her personal communicator flashing red. Red meant emergency. Red meant the Galactic Council needed her immediately. She had been Earth's ambassador to the Council for 2 years now. In those 2 years, she had attended exactly 47 official meetings. In 46 of them, nobody had asked for her opinion. Humanity was new to the galaxy. New meant insignificant. Insignificant meant invisible. But red messages were different. Ji-won dressed quickly in her formal uniform. The dark blue fabric felt heavy on her shoulders. She looked at herself in the mirror. At 38 years old, she looked tired. 2 years of being ignored by alien civilizations would do that to anyone. Her door chimed. Commander Min-ho Choi stood outside, already dressed and ready. Minho was her military attaché, which was a fancy way of saying he was her bodyguard and advisor. He was 10 years younger than her, but his eyes looked older. He had seen combat during the Mars Rebellion. Real combat changed people. Did you read the message? Minho asked as they walked to the transport bay. Only the first line. Emergency summons to Calvarus Prime, that's all I needed to know. I read the whole thing. They didn't say why. Ji-won stopped walking. They never say why, but they've never sent a red message before. Their transport ship was small, designed for speed rather than comfort. The journey to Calvarus Prime would take 18 hours through the quantum tunnels. Ji-won tried to sleep during the trip. She couldn't. Minho sat across from her, cleaning his sidearm. He always cleaned his weapon when he was nervous. Calvarus Prime came into view exactly 18 hours later. The station orbited a neutron star, which meant the entire structure had to be shielded with technology humanity didn't fully understand yet. The station looked like a massive ring, rotating slowly in the darkness. 47 different species called this place the center of galactic civilization. Their transport docked at the human section. The human section was small, located near the waste processing facilities. Location meant everything in galactic politics. As soon as they stepped off the transport, Ji-won knew something was very wrong. The station buzzed with activity. Aliens of every species rushed through the corridors. Some were shouting. Some were carrying data tablets, moving with urgent purpose. She had never seen the station like this. Stay close, Minho said quietly. His hand moved near his weapon. The council chamber was located at the center of the ring. It took them 20 minutes to reach it through the chaos. Guards stood at the entrance, towering aliens from the Velthran sovereignty. They normally looked bored. Today they looked afraid. The chamber doors opened and Ji-won stepped into madness. The council chamber was designed to hold representatives from all 47 member species. Today every seat was filled. Delegates shouted at each other across the circular room. Translators struggled to keep up with the multiple languages. The chamber's main hologram display showed something Ji-won didn't understand at first. Red dots spreading across a star map. Hundreds of red dots, thousands, silence. The voice boomed through the chamber. It belonged to Kelsar Vane, the head of the Velthran sovereignty. The Velthrans had kept peace in the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were the closest thing the galaxy had to heroes. The chamber went quiet. Kelsar Vane looked tired. His blue skin had lost its usual glow. He stood at his podium, which was the largest and most ornate in the room. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of bad news. Honored delegates, I will be direct. The consuming swarm has breached the Outer Rim territories. The chamber exploded with noise again. Ji-won had heard of the consuming swarm. Everyone had. They were the nightmare story species told their children. A hive mind that consumed all biological matter. A species that couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be bargained with, couldn't be stopped, except they were supposed to be extinct. The Velthrans had driven them to extinction 2,000 years ago. How many worlds? Someone shouted. Kelsar Vane looked down at his data display. 42 confirmed lost. Another 160 have gone silent. We estimate 12 billion sentients are dead or consumed. 12 billion. The number was too large to understand. Earth's entire population was only 9 billion. The Velthran sovereignty is withdrawing all military forces to our core systems. Kelsar continued. We must protect our homeworld. We recommend all species do the same. The chamber erupted again. This time, the noise was different. This was anger, panic, accusation. A delegate from the Althean Empire stood. The Altheans were proud, warlike, and powerful. You kept peace for millennia, and now you abandon us? What kind of peacekeepers run away? The kind that want to survive, Kelser shot back. The swarm isn't what it was 2,000 years ago. It has adapted, evolved. Our weapons barely slow it down. Then we develop new weapons, another delegate shouted. We work together. Work together? A delegate from the Grevik commune laughed bitterly. The Greviks looked like large insects, their mandibles clicking as they spoke. The Althans have blocked our trade routes for 60 years. The Corellians refuse to share their shield technology. The Antari won't even attend meetings if we're present. And now you want unity? The shouting began again. Old grudges surfaced. Ancient rivalries flared back to life. The Althans blamed the Greviks for not detecting the threat sooner. The Greviks blamed the Velthrons for lying about defeating the swarm completely. Everyone blamed everyone else. G1 sat in humanity's seat and watched. Their seat was small, tucked in the back corner. From here she could see the whole chamber. She could see the fear in their eyes. She could see the way they turned on each other instead of facing the real threat. Minho leaned close to her. They're going to let everyone die, aren't they? Jiwan didn't answer immediately. She watched as the Althaean delegate threatened to invade Grevik space. She watched as the Corellian delegate announced they were closing their borders to all refugees. She watched as civilization crumbled in real time. Yes, she finally said. They're paralyzed. They can't agree on anything. What do we do? Jiwan looked at the hologram display again. The red dots had spread further just in the last 10 minutes. Somewhere out there, people were dying. Families were being consumed. Children were screaming for help that would never come. These advanced species had technology centuries beyond Earth's. They had weapons that could crack planets. They had shields that could stop stars. They had everything they needed to fight, everything except the will to do it together. I don't know yet, Jiwan said quietly, but we need to do something. The shouting continued for 3 more hours. No decisions were made. No plans were formed. When the session finally ended, delegates stormed out, returning to their private quarters to contact their home governments. Jiwan and Minho walked back to the human section in silence. The corridors were emptier now. The initial panic had settled into grim acceptance. Back in her quarters, Jiwan pulled up the star maps. She studied the swarm's advance. It was methodical, intelligent. It wasn't just consuming randomly. It was cutting off escape routes, trapping populations, maximizing its harvest. Get me a secure line to Earth, she told Minho. I need to talk to the president. While Minho set up the communication, Jiwan looked out her window at the neutron star spinning below. Humanity had fought so hard to reach the stars. They had nearly destroyed themselves getting here. The resource wars had killed 2 billion people. Korea had been devastated. Her own parents had died in the Seoul fires, but humanity had survived. They had learned. They had unified. She wondered if the galaxy could learn the same lesson, or if it was already too late. The communication link connected. President Hayes appeared on the screen looking concerned. Ambassador Park, I heard about the emergency session. Madam President, we have a situation. Ji-won remembered the first time she saw Earth from space. She had been 23 years old, fresh out of the diplomatic academy. The planet looked so fragile from orbit, blue and white and beautiful. It was hard to believe that only 15 years earlier, that beautiful planet had been tearing itself apart. The resource wars had started over water, then oil, then rare minerals, then everything. Nations fought nations. Cities burned. Millions fled their homes looking for somewhere safe. Nowhere was safe. Korea had been hit hard. The Seoul fires had lasted 3 weeks. Ji-won's parents had refused to leave their home. They believed the government would protect them. They were wrong. She was 16 when she got the news. She was in Busan with her grandmother when Seoul fell silent. That was when everything changed. When people realized they had a choice. Die fighting each other or live working together. The unification hadn't been easy. Old hatreds died hard. But fear was a powerful motivator. When you've lost everything, you learn what actually matters. Survival matters. Your neighbor's survival matters. Because alone, everyone dies. Ji-won shook herself from the memory. The past was important, but the present was urgent. She had been on Calvarus Prime for 3 days now. 3 days of emergency sessions. 3 days of watching the council accomplish nothing. The swarm continued its advance. The red dots on the map multiplied. Latest count, 89 worlds confirmed lost. 247 gone silent. Over 20 billion sentients dead or consumed, and the council argued. On the fourth day, Jiwan went looking for answers. Minyo accompanied her to the lower levels of the station, where the smaller delegations kept their offices. She was looking for Kyungsoo Han, the deputy delegate from the Grevik commune. Kyungsoo was different from the other delegates. He actually talked to her. In 2 years, they had developed something almost like friendship. As much as friendship could exist between a human and an insect-like alien, who communicated partly through pheromones. She found him in his office, surrounded by data screens. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of stress. "Ambassador Park," he said through his translator, "I assume you're here to ask why we're all being idiots?" Jiwan sat down without being invited. "I was going to use more diplomatic language, but yes." Kyungsoo's antennae drooped. "My people have 17 merchant fleets trapped behind swarm lines. Over 60,000 Grevik civilians. The council won't authorize a rescue mission. They say it would provoke the swarm into expanding its advance." "Provoke it? It's already consuming everything in its path, I know." I tried to explain that. But the Altheans control the military committee, and they refuse to risk their ships for Grevik merchants. "Old grudges die hard, Ambassador." Jiwan leaned forward. "So what happens to those 60,000 civilians?" Kyungsoo was quiet for a long moment. "They die, or worse, they get consumed, added to the swarm's biomass. My government has already written them off. Better to lose 60,000 than risk losing more trying to save them. That's insane. That's politics." Kyungsoo's translator gave his words a bitter edge. "You're new to the galaxy, Ambassador. You don't understand how deep these divisions run. The Althans and Greviks have been enemies for 400 years. The Corellians trust no one. The Velthrons are only concerned with protecting their own legacy. We're not a civilization. We're 47 different civilizations pretending to cooperate." Jiwan stood up. "Then maybe it's time to stop pretending." She left Kyungsoo's office with her mind racing. Minyo followed her back to the human section without speaking. He knew her well enough to recognize when she was planning something. Back in her quarters, Jiwan contacted Earth again. This time she needed to speak with Admiral Sunmi Kang, the commander of Earth's Deep Space Fleet. Sunmi's face appeared on the screen. She was 45 with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had commanded the defense of Mars during the rebellion. She had also commanded the evacuation when Mars couldn't be saved. She knew about impossible choices. "Admiral Kang, I need to know the truth. How many ships can Earth spare for an operation in swarm territory?" Sunmi didn't hesitate. "All of them if needed." "What are you planning, Ambassador?" "Something probably stupid. The Council is paralyzed. Billions are dying while they argue. I want to propose that humanity leads a coalition strike force into swarm space." Sunmi was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. Not a happy laugh. A tired one. "You know what our fleet looks like compared to theirs, right? 7 capital ships, 23 frigates. The Altheans have 300 capital ships. The Velthrans have 500. And you want us to lead?" "I want us to act. Someone has to. If we sit here and do nothing, we're just as guilty as they are. We'll lose ships. Probably most of them, I know. People will die. Our people. I know that too." Sunmi nodded slowly. "I'll start preparing the fleet. But Ambassador, you better make sure this is worth it, because once we commit, there's no going back." After the call ended, Minho spoke up. "She's right. We'll lose a lot of people, maybe for nothing." Jiwan turned to face him. "Do you remember the soul fires? I was 7 years old. I remember the smoke. The smell. My family barely made it out. My parents didn't make it out. And you know what I learned from that? Doing nothing isn't safe. It's just slow death. The galaxy can die slowly while they argue, or they can fight and maybe survive. Someone has to show them that fighting is possible." Minho checked his weapon again. "When do we make the proposal?" "Tomorrow. The council meets for another emergency session. I've already requested time to speak. They'll say no, probably, but I have to try." That night, Jiwon couldn't sleep. She spent hours writing her speech, then rewriting it, then throwing it away and starting over. How do you convince an entire galaxy to risk everything? How do you make them care about strangers dying light years away? She thought about her parents again, about the soul fires, about the choice humanity had made, change or die. The galaxy faced the same choice now. They just didn't know it yet. The next morning, Jiwon dressed in her formal uniform. She pinned on her medals. She had 3. 1 for diplomatic service, 1 for representing Earth at the first council meeting, 1 for surviving 2 years of being ignored by aliens. Today she would earn a 4th, or she would be thrown out of the council entirely. Minho escorted her to the chamber. The corridors were less chaotic than they had been days earlier. The panic had faded into numb acceptance. People walked like they had already lost. The council chamber filled slowly. Many delegations had reduced their attendance. Only the senior delegates remained. Everyone else had fled back to their home systems to prepare for the inevitable. Kelser Vane called the session to order. His blue skin looked even paler than before. The Velthrons had finished their withdrawal. Their fleet was gone. The galaxy's peacekeepers had abandoned their post. "We have one item on today's agenda," Kelser announced. "Ambassador G1 Park of Earth has requested to address the council." A ripple of surprise went through the chamber. Some delegates looked annoyed. Others looked curious. Most looked indifferent. G1 stood and walked to the speaking podium. Her heart hammered in her chest. She had given hundreds of speeches in her career. None of them had mattered like this one. She looked out at the assembled delegates. 47 species. Thousands of years of combined history, technology beyond Earth's wildest dreams, and all of it useless because they couldn't agree on anything. She opened her mouth to speak. Her carefully prepared words vanished from her mind. Instead, she spoke from the heart. 847 worlds are at risk of swarm consumption in the next 30 days. 12 billion sentients have already died. We've been meeting for 6 days. We've made 0 plans, 0 coordinated defense strategies, 0 attempts to save anyone. The chamber remained silent. She had their attention, at least for now. Humanity would like to volunteer to lead the first strike force into swarm territory. Now the chamber erupted. Delegates shouted, laughed. Some looked at her like she was insane. Thalos Vex, the Altheian military coordinator, stood up. His scales gleamed red with amusement. "Your entire fleet couldn't defend a single planetary system against swarm scouts. You want to lead an offensive? That's adorable." Other delegates joined in the mockery. The human fleet was tiny, primitive. Their weapons were chemical-based. Their shields were barely functional. They were children playing at war. Jiwan waited for the noise to die down. Then she spoke again, her voice cutting through the chamber. "You're right. We'll probably lose every ship. Most of our people will die. But while we're buying time with our lives, maybe you'll figure out how to save your own people." The mockery faded. Some delegates looked uncomfortable now. "Or," Jiwan continued, "you can explain to your children why you let the galaxy burn because you were too proud to work together. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? Pride, old grudges, ancient rivalries. You'd rather die than admit you need each other." She paused, looking directly at Thalos Vex. Humanity didn't survive the worst of itself just to watch the galaxy commit suicide. Then she said the words that would change everything. "It's time for war. Not the war you're afraid of. The war we need. A united one." The silence in the council chamber felt like a physical weight. Jiwan stood at the podium, her words hanging in the air. 47 species stared at her. Some looked shocked. Some looked angry. Some looked like they were considering her words carefully. Thalos Vex was the first to break the silence. The Althan military coordinator's scales had shifted from red to a darker purple. Anger, Jiwan had learned. Purple meant anger. "You dare lecture us about unity? Humanity has been in space for barely a century. You know nothing of our history. Nothing of our conflicts. The Grevix sabotaged Altheian colonies 300 years ago. The Corellians stole our technology. These wounds don't heal just because you ask nicely." "Then you'll die with those wounds still fresh," G1 said simply. "And the swarm won't care about your history. It will consume you all the same." Another delegate stood. This one was from a species G1 didn't recognize. Small, covered in fur with large eyes. The translator identified them as Yantari. "Even if we wanted to help, what good would it do? The Velthrons couldn't stop the swarm. They're the most advanced military in the galaxy. If they failed, what hope do the rest of us have?" Before G1 could answer, someone else stood. Taehyun Song, the delegate from the Corellian Assembly. The Corellians were known for being neutral in all conflicts. They traded with everyone and took sides with no one. Daehyun was older than most delegates, his silver skin marked with age lines. "The Velthrons failed because they fought alone," Daehyun said quietly. "They saw the swarm as their problem to solve. Their legacy to protect. They didn't ask for help until it was too late? Kelser Vane's blue skin flushed darker. The Velthron leader looked like he wanted to argue, but he stayed silent. Daehyun continued, his voice carrying across the chamber. I've been on this council for 30 years. 30 years of watching us fight over trade routes and border disputes and ancient grudges. And now we face actual extinction, and we're still fighting. He turned to look at Jiwon. The humans are right. Not because they're stronger or smarter, but because they understand something we've forgotten. Survival requires sacrifice. Easy words, Thalos Vex shot back. Will the Corellians commit ships to this suicide mission? Or just words? Daehyun was quiet for a long moment. Jiwon watched him carefully. She knew what he was weighing. The Corellians had stayed neutral for centuries. Their whole society was built on not taking sides. If Daehyun committed Corellian ships to this fight, he would be breaking 300 years of tradition. If the humans are willing to die for our people, Daehyun finally said, then perhaps we should be willing to live for theirs. The Corellian fleet will join this coalition. The chamber exploded with noise again. Some delegates cheered. Others shouted protests. But something had shifted. Someone had stepped forward. Someone had said yes. A Grevik delegate stood. Not Kyungsu, but someone senior. The Grevik commune has 60,000 civilians trapped behind swarm lines. If this coalition is willing to attempt a rescue, then we will contribute ships and resources. The Yantari collective will send medical vessels. The small furry delegate added. Someone will need to treat the wounded. One by one, delegates began to commit. Not all of them. The Althaeans refused. Several other major powers held back. But enough said yes. Enough took the leap. Jiwon watched it happen with a mixture of hope and fear. Hope because it was working. Fear because now they actually had to do this. They had to take this ragtag coalition and somehow defeat a threat that had crushed the galaxy's greatest military. The session lasted another 4 hours. Details were hammered out. Ship commitments were made. Command structures were argued over. By the end, they had a plan, or at least the beginning of one. 17 species had committed ships. 340 vessels total. Humanity contributed 6 of their 7 capital ships and 19 frigates. It was more than half their entire fleet. Every other species contributed less proportionally, but it was still more than Jiwon had hoped for. The question of command was settled quickly. Admiral Sunmi Kang would lead the coalition fleet. She had the most recent combat experience and, more importantly, the other species seemed willing to follow her, maybe because they assumed she would fail, and they wanted a human to take the blame. After the session ended, Jiwon returned to her quarters exhausted. Minyo was already there reviewing tactical data. You did it, he said without looking up. You actually convinced them. I didn't convince everyone. The Althans are still refusing. So are the Zentari and the Vosk. But you convinced enough. That's more than anyone expected. Jiwon sat down heavily. Now comes the hard part. Actually winning. Over the next 2 weeks, the coalition fleet assembled at Rally Point Gamma, a neutral station near the edge of swarm-controlled space. Jiwon spent those weeks on Calvarus Prime, coordinating logistics and managing the constant diplomatic fires that erupted. The Greviks wanted priority given to rescuing their trapped merchant fleets. The Yantari insisted on humanitarian rules of engagement. The Corellians needed assurances that their participation wouldn't be seen as choosing sides in other conflicts. Everyone had demands. Jiwon handled it all with patience she didn't know she had. She mediated disputes. She made compromises. She reminded everyone what they were fighting for. Kyungsu visited her office on the 10th day. His mandibles clicked in what she had learned was their equivalent of a smile. You've changed the galaxy, Ambassador Park. Whether we win or lose, you've proven something. That unity is possible. We haven't proven anything yet. We still have to fight. True. But we're fighting together. That's already a miracle. On the 14th day, Admiral Sunmi sent word that the fleet was ready. All ships had arrived at Rally Point Gamma. All crews had completed joint training exercises. They were as prepared as they could be. Jiwon boarded a transport with Minho. She wanted to see the fleet before it departed. She wanted to look the soldiers in the eye and know that what she had asked of them was worth it. Rally Point Gamma looked like chaos. 340 ships from 17 different species, all trying to coordinate in one place. The communication networks were overloaded. Ships kept almost colliding because different species had different navigation protocols. But somehow it was working. Engineers from different species helped each other with repairs. Pilots shared tactical information. Medical teams coordinated triage plans. It was messy and imperfect, but it was happening. Jiwan met Admiral Sunmi on the bridge of the flagship, a human vessel called the Indomitable. It wasn't the largest ship in the fleet, but it had the most advanced communication systems. That made it the natural choice for coordinating the coalition. Sunmi looked tired but determined. "Ambassador Park, come to see us off. Come to make sure you know what you're getting into." "I know exactly what I'm getting into. A battle we'll probably lose, leading a fleet that barely trusts each other, against an enemy that's beaten everyone who's fought it." Sunmi smiled grimly. "Just another Tuesday." Minho stepped forward. "Admiral, I'm officially requesting transfer to fleet duty. The ambassador needs a military attaché. You need tactical officers. I'm more useful here." Sunmi looked at Jiwan, who nodded. "I'll manage without him. You need good people more than I do." "All right, Commander Choi, welcome to the fleet. Report to Tactical Station 3. As Minho left, Sunmi turned back to Jiwan. "You know what you've done, right? You've given humanity the most dangerous job in the galaxy, leading a coalition against impossible odds. If we fail, we look like fools. If we succeed, we become threats. Either way, we'll never be invisible again." "Good. Invisible won't save anyone." Sunmi pulled up a holographic display. It showed their target, the Karos Belt, a dense asteroid field that the swarm was using as a staging ground. Intelligence suggested a major swarm fleet was gathering there, preparing to push deeper into civilized space. "We hit them here. We buy time for evacuations throughout 3 sectors. We also rescue those Grevik merchant fleets. That's the good news. And the bad news? The bad news is that swarm fleets are adaptive. They learn from every encounter. The more we fight them, the better they get at fighting us. So our first strike needs to count. We might not get a second chance." Jiwan studied the tactical display. She didn't understand half of what she was seeing. Ship movements and weapon ranges and formation strategies. That wasn't her world. Her world was words and diplomacy and compromise. But she had run out of words. Diplomacy had failed. Compromise was impossible. Now it was time for people like Sunmi and Minho to do what they did best. "When do you depart?" Jiwan asked. 18 hours. I'm giving the crews time to rest and make their peace with whatever gods they believe in. Do you think we can win?" Sunmi was quiet for a long moment. "I think we can hurt them. I think we can slow them down. I think we can save some lives. Whether that counts as winning depends on your perspective." Jiwan extended her hand. Sunmi shook it firmly. "Good luck, Admiral. Keep the politicians from killing each other while we're gone, Ambassador. I'd hate to save the galaxy only to come back and find you all started another war." Jiwan left the Indomitable and returned to her transport. As they pulled away from Rally Point Gamma, she looked out the viewport at the assembled fleet. 340 ships from 17 different species. The Battle of Karos Belt began at 600 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Jiwan watched it from Calvarus Prime, standing in the Council's military observation center with dozens of other delegates. The holographic display showed the Coalition fleet approaching the asteroid field in formation, 340. Ships against an enemy they could barely understand. The Swarm fleet appeared on sensors 30 minutes later. Bioships, grown rather than built, each one a living creature the size of a city, pulsing with organic weapons and adaptive armor. The display counted them, 412 swarm vessels. The Coalition was outnumbered. And according to the tactical data streaming in, outgunned too. Swarm bioships were larger, faster, and more heavily armed than most Coalition vessels. "They should retreat," Thalos Vex said from across the observation center. The Althean military coordinator had been watching the display with obvious satisfaction. He wanted the Coalition to fail. It would prove he had been right to stay out of it. Jiwan didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the display, watching the 2 fleets move toward each other like ancient armies. The first shots were fired at 6:47 hours. The Coalition fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy weapons, missile barrages, kinetic rounds. The swarm bioships absorbed the initial volley with minimal damage. Their organic armor adapted in real time, hardening against the attack. Then the swarm returned fire. Bioplasma tore through space. melting the shields of 3 Corellian destroyers in the first exchange. A Grevik cruiser took a direct hit and broke apart, its atmosphere venting into space along with its crew. The battle became chaos. Ships maneuvered desperately, trying to find advantageous positions. The swarm fleet moved with frightening coordination, each bioship acting as part of a single organism. They focused their fire, overwhelming individual ships before moving to the next target. The coalition was losing. Badly. On the Indomitable, Admiral Sunmi watched her fleet being torn apart. 7 ships destroyed in the first 15 minutes, another dozen heavily damaged. The swarm had barely taken any losses. Their adaptive armor made conventional weapons nearly useless. All ships, this is Indomitable, Sunmi broadcast on the Coalition command channel. Execute pattern Delta 7. Commander Minho, now serving as her primary tactical officer, looked up from his station. Admiral Delta 7 is a suicide formation. We'll be drawing all their fire. I know what it is, Commander. Execute the order. Delta 7 was a human battle doctrine developed during the Mars Rebellion. The principle was simple. Concentrate your weakest forces into a spear formation and drive directly at the enemy's center. The enemy would focus on the obvious threat, creating opportunities for your stronger forces to flank and attack from better positions. The obvious threat would be destroyed, but sometimes sacrifice bought victory. 6 human capital ships and 19 human frigates formed up into a tight wedge formation. The Indomitable at the point, the other vessels arranged behind and beside it. They accelerated directly toward the center of the swarm fleet. The other coalition commanders understood immediately what Sunmi was doing. Some protested. Others prepared to take advantage of the opening she was creating. Daehyun Song, commanding the Corellian contingent, addressed his ships. All Corellian vessels form up on the Indomitable's flanks. If the humans are willing to die for us, then we die with them. On Calvaris Prime, Jiwon watched the human ships drive into the heart of the swarm fleet. Every instinct screamed at her to order them to retreat. But she had no authority over the fleet. She could only watch. The swarm recognized the threat immediately. Every bioship in the center of their formation turned to face the human wedge. Bioplasma weapons charged and fired, concentrated volleys that lit up space like a second sun. The first human frigate disintegrated under the barrage, then a second, then a third. The human capital ships absorbed incredible damage, their shields failing one by one. The Indomitable's forward section was hit directly, tearing away half the ship's armored prow. But the human ships didn't stop. They kept coming even as they were torn apart. The maneuver worked. With the swarm's attention focused on the human wedge, the rest of the coalition fleet attacked from the flanks. Grevik ships targeted the swarm's formation, breaking their coordination. Yantari vessels launched specialized weapons designed to disrupt biological processes. Corellian heavy cruisers fired armor-piercing rounds that finally penetrated the adaptive hulls. The swarm fleet began to falter. For the first time in the battle, they were taking significant losses. Bioships broke apart, leaking fluids into space. Others tried to adapt to the multi-directional attack but couldn't adjust fast enough. But the price was terrible. 4 human capital ships were destroyed in the first pass. 6 more frigates were gone. The remaining human vessels were heavily damaged, barely able to fight. On the Indomitable, alarms blared throughout the ship. Engineering reported primary power failing. Life support was down in 3 sections. The ship was dying. Sunmi sat in her command chair, blood running down her face from a head wound. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically to keep the ship functional. Status of the fleet? She asked. Minho checked his displays, many of which were flickering or dead. We've lost 11 ships total, 23 more heavily damaged. But the swarm is breaking. Their formation is collapsing. Good. Order all ships to press the attack. Don't give them time to adapt. Admiral, we need to fall back. The Indomitable is barely holding together. Sunmi looked at the tactical display. The battle was at a tipping point. If they pressed now, they could destroy the swarm fleet. If they hesitated, the swarm would adapt and counterattack. We're not falling back. All power to forward weapons. Target the largest bioship in their formation. If we take out their command vessel, the rest will lose coordination. Admiral, that's an order, Commander. The Indomitable surged forward one last time, its remaining weapons blazing. Other coalition ships followed, pressing the attack. The swarm tried to regroup, but they were overwhelmed. Coalition ships targeted their command bioship with concentrated fire. The massive creature burst apart in a spray of organic matter. Without its coordination, the remaining swarm vessels fell into disarray. Some tried to flee. Others fought on mindlessly. The Coalition fleet hunted them down systematically. 2 hours after it began, the Battle of Karos Belt was over. The swarm fleet was destroyed. The Coalition had won, but the cost was staggering. On Calvaris Prime, Jiwan stared at the casualty reports as they came in. 4 human capital ships destroyed, 11 frigates gone, over 16,000 human personnel dead or missing. The humans had taken more casualties than every other species combined. Other delegates watched the reports with mixed reactions. Some looked relieved that the battle was won. Others looked horrified at the human losses. A few, like Thalos Vex, looked vindicated. They had been right. It had been too costly. Jiwan left the observation center without speaking to anyone. She returned to her quarters and locked the door. Only then did she allow herself to break down. She had asked them to fight. She had convinced them to risk their lives. And they had done it. They had won. But 16,000 people were dead. 16,000 families would get the news. 16,000 lives ended because she had made a speech. A message came through on her personal communicator. It was from Minho, transmitted from the heavily damaged Indomitable. Ambassador Park. Thought you should know. We rescued the Grevik merchant fleets. All 60,000 civilians are safe. The refugee worlds in this sector are secure. Admiral Kang wanted me to tell you. It was worth it. Jiwan read the message 3 times. Then she got up, washed her face, and went back to work. There would be time to grieve later. Right now there were things that needed to be done. The council convened an emergency session the next day. The delegates who had stayed out of the battle now wanted to discuss terms for joining the coalition. Success had made them brave. Jiwan sat in humanity's small seat and listened to them posture and bargain. The Altheans wanted command positions if they contributed ships. The Zentari wanted resource allocations. The Vosk wanted political concessions. Finally, she stood up. The chamber went quiet. She had earned that respect with human blood. We won a battle, not the war. The swarm is still out there. More worlds are still dying. If you want to join the coalition now, you're welcome. But we're not negotiating. We're not bargaining. We're fighting. If that's not enough for you, then stay home. She sat back down. The delegates looked uncomfortable. They weren't used to being addressed that way. But no one argued. Over the next week, more species joined the coalition. Not because they suddenly believed in unity, because they saw that the coalition could win, because they were afraid of being left behind, because the humans had shown them it was possible. The human fleet returned to Rally Point Gamma for repairs. What was left of it? 2 damaged capital ships and 8 frigates. Out of the original 25 ships, only 10 remained functional. Jiwan traveled to meet them. She needed to see the survivors. She needed to face what her words had cost. She found Minho in the medical bay of the Indomitable. He had been injured during the battle, but not seriously. Burns on his arms, a concussion, some broken ribs. He would recover. How's the Admiral? Jiwan asked. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Karos Belt. 6 months of constant warfare. 6 months of slow, grinding progress against the swarm. 6 months of watching the coalition grow from 17 species to 42. The galaxy was finally learning to fight together. It was learning the hard way. Jiwan stood in the rebuilt council chamber on Calvaris Prime. The chamber looked different now. The ornate decorations were gone, replaced by tactical displays and communication equipment. This wasn't a place for political theater anymore. It was a war room. She had changed too. Her uniform showed signs of wear. Her face had new lines around her eyes. Her hair, once perfectly maintained, was now cut short for practicality. She looked like what she had become, a person carrying the weight of galactic survival. The council meeting that day was different from all the others. Today they would vote on the structure of a permanent multi-species military force, a galactic defense fleet that would continue even after the swarm was defeated. If the swarm was defeated, Kelsar Vane called the session to order. The Velthron leader looked diminished somehow. His people had returned to the fight 3 months ago, after watching the coalition win battle after battle without them. But the Velthrons were no longer the galaxy's protectors. That role had shifted. We have a proposal before us, Kelsar said. A permanent galactic defense initiative. 42 species contributing ships, resources, and personnel. A unified command structure. Shared technology and tactics. This has never been attempted in our history. Because it's never been necessary. Thelos Vex interjected. The Althan had joined the coalition after Karis Belt, though he still resented it. The question is whether we'll maintain this unity once the immediate threat is gone. That's exactly why we need to formalize it now, Jiwan said. While we remember why unity matters, while the cost is still fresh, she pulled up a holographic memorial. Faces scrolled past. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. Every person who had died fighting the swarm over the past 6 months. Human faces dominated the display. Not because humans were the only ones fighting, but because humans had fought the hardest. 47,000 human military personnel have died in this war. Jiwan said quietly. That's more than any other single species. It's more than some species' entire contributions. Earth's population is smaller than most of yours. We can't afford these losses, but we keep fighting because someone has to. She closed the memorial display. The question isn't whether we can maintain unity. It's whether we can afford not to. The swarm is just one threat. There will be others. And when they come, we need to be ready. Together. The vote was called. 40 species voted in favor. 2 abstained. None voted against. The Galactic Defense Initiative was established. A permanent multi-species military force commanded by a council of species representatives. After the vote, delegates congratulated each other. They acted like they had achieved something great. Maybe they had. Or maybe they had just learned a lesson the hard way that humanity learned decades ago. Jiwan left the chamber before the celebrations could start. She had work to do. Real work, not political theater. She met with Admiral Sunmi in the Military Planning Center. Sunmi had recovered from her injuries, though she now walked with a slight limp. The doctors said it would fade with time. Jiwan wasn't sure. Some wounds didn't heal. We have intelligence on a primary swarm hive nexus, Sunmi said, pulling up a tactical display. Located in the Kepler Expanse, 3 sectors deep into swarm territory. If we can destroy it, the swarm's coordination will collapse across multiple regions. Jiwan studied the display. The hive nexus was heavily defended. Thousands of bioships, organic defense structures, adaptive shields. It was suicide to attack it. How many ships would we need? She asked. Everything we have. The entire coalition fleet. And even then, our probability of success is maybe 40%. 40% isn't good enough. It's the best we'll get. The longer we wait, the stronger they become. This is our window. Jiwan knew Sunmi was right. She had been working with military strategists for 6 months now. She understood the calculations. She knew what was at stake. What about casualties? Sunmi was quiet for a moment. Heavy, we'll lose ships. A lot of them. Best case scenario, we lose 30% of the fleet. Worst case, we lose everything. And if we don't attack, the swarm continues expanding. More worlds fall. More billions die. In a year, maybe less, they'll be unstoppable. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. It was just a calculation of which death toll was acceptable. How soon can the fleet be ready? 2 weeks. We need time to coordinate with all 42 species. Some of them are still arguing about formation positions and command structures. Tell them they have 1 week. Either they're ready or they stay behind. After Sunmi left, Jiwan sat alone in the planning center. She looked at the tactical display showing the hive nexus. So many ships would die there. So many people would never come home. She thought about Earth. She hadn't been home in 2 years. She wondered what it looked like now. Whether her grandmother was still alive. Whether the memorials for the fallen had overtaken the parks and squares. Her communicator chimed. It was Minho. He had been promoted to commander of tactical operations for the entire coalition fleet. The youngest person ever to hold that position. Not because of politics or favoritism, because he was good at his job, because in war competence mattered more than anything else. Ambassador, we need to talk about the attack plan. Several species are objecting to the human tactical doctrine. They think it's too aggressive. What do you think? I think aggressive is the only thing that's worked so far. But you'll need to convince them. Jiwan spent the next week in constant meetings. Species representatives who wanted safer tactics. Politicians who worried about casualties. Military commanders who doubted the plan would work. She addressed every concern. She made every argument. She reminded everyone what was at stake, but mostly, she reminded them of Karos Belt, of what had been accomplished when species stopped arguing and started fighting. The coalition fleet assembled at a staging point near swarm territory. It was the largest military force in galactic history. Over 2,000 ships from 42 species. Hundreds of thousands of personnel. It was magnificent and terrifying. Ji-won traveled to the staging point to see the fleet off. She moved through the massive formation, visiting ships from different species. She spoke with crews. She listened to their fears. She tried to give them hope. On a Corellian cruiser, she met a young weapons officer named Hyejin Ko. Hyejin was human, one of thousands who had volunteered to serve on Allied ships to help train their crews in human tactics. "Are you scared?" Ji-won asked her. "Terrified," Hyejin admitted, "but I'm more scared of what happens if we don't fight. My family is on a frontier world. If the swarm reaches them..." She didn't finish the sentence. Ji-won understood. Everyone in the coalition had someone they were fighting for. Some motivation beyond duty or honor. That's what made them dangerous. They weren't just following orders. They were protecting their homes. She visited the Indomitable last. The ship had been repaired and upgraded with technology from multiple species. It was stronger now than it had been before Karos Belt, but it carried scars. Sections of the hull still showed repair patches. The bridge had been rebuilt, but everyone remembered what had happened there. Sunmi met her in the observation deck. They stood together looking out at the assembled fleet. "This is it," Sunmi said. "After this, the war changes. Either we break the swarm's back or they break ours." "No pressure," Sunmi smiled slightly. "You know what the crews are saying? They're calling this Ji-won's war. They say you started it with one speech. That's not fair to everyone else who's fighting." "Maybe not, but it's true anyway. You changed something fundamental. You showed the galaxy it could be better than it was." The fleet departed 6 hours later. Ji-won watched from the staging point as 2,000 ships entered quantum tunnel space heading toward the Hive Nexus. Toward probable death. Toward possible victory. Then she returned to Calvaris Prime to wait. There was nothing else she could do. The Battle of the Kepler Expanse lasted 9 hours. Ji-won watched it through the tactical feeds, though the data was delayed and incomplete. She saw ships entering the battle. She saw them fighting. She saw them dying. The casualties mounted quickly. The swarm threw everything at the coalition fleet. Thousands of bioships, weapons that adapted in real time, tactics that shifted and evolved. The swarm had learned from every previous encounter. They were ready, but so was the coalition. Ships from different species coordinated in ways that would have been impossible a year ago. Humans and Altheans fighting side by side, Greviks and Corellians covering each other's flanks. Velthrons and Yantari working together seamlessly. The galaxy had learned to fight as one. The Hive Nexus was destroyed 7 hours into the battle. A coalition strike force led by Commander Minho Choi penetrated to the core and detonated a massive explosive payload. The resulting detonation tore through the entire structure, destroying not just the Nexus but hundreds of surrounding bioships. The remaining swarm forces lost coordination immediately. They fought on, but individually rather than as a unified force. The coalition pressed their advantage, hunting down the scattered enemy ships systematically.